Hey guys, Trevor Alexander here with Burn Saddlery. I've been a saddle maker for about 9 years now, and today I'm going to teach you how we build and install fender fillers. I think about anybody can do it. So the first thing we're going to need to do is measure the leather for our pattern. So our seat filler is going to basically replicate the movement that our stirrup leather and fender have, plus it's going to make this transition from here to the skirt nice and smooth. So we're going to start, and we're going to go just a little bit, probably to the point of the swell here, and then back to here. So it's going to be 8.5 inches long, and then it will be about 6 inches down from here. It's where everything starts to really open up, and you don't have to worry about a filler down in here anymore. So we're going to be 8.5 by 6, and then we know that the top of this is 3.25 at the top of our bar where our stirrup leather slot comes through. So we have 3.25 here, which tapers to, let's call it 4.5. So we have 3.25, 4.5, 8.5, and 6. And let's put those measurements on some paper and we will get our seat fillers cut out. So the first measurement that we're going to start with is at the top of the bar, right where that stirrup leather slot comes around, is 3.25. So we're going to take it down to 3, which is the actual measurement of the stirrup leather. And then it tapers down to 4.5. From this line here, should be 4.5 to here. And we're going to add just a little bit extra up top, just so that it kind of sets in there nice and doesn't try and come out on us. And then from this 4.5, we're going to do our 8.5 mark. And then 6 inches down from that. And then we're going to turn all of these into radiuses, so there's no sharp corners to make weird divots in our seat. So we're just going to build a radius from here out to the front. And from here out to the back. And these sharp corners down on the bottom here won't matter because the seat will have flared enough by the time it gets to here that it will not be an issue. So let's go ahead and get this piece cut out. Okay, let's make sure this fits in the saddle and then we'll cut it out of leather. Looks like it fits like a glove. So now that we know that it fits, we're going to go ahead and cut this part out of leather, and then we will show you how to cut the other piece. So for our fillers, we're going to take this guy that we have, and we're going to take our fender pattern. This is specific to your fender pattern because your fender pattern is the pattern that's going in your saddle. So it's specific that it's your fender pattern that's being used here. This replicates the movement of our stirrup leather, and this will replicate the movement of our fender. So we're going to have two pieces cut. We're going to have this piece that we made, and then we're going to have the top half of your stirrup leather to about an inch and a half down past where our filler sits, just like that. So about an inch and a half down from here. And that will be our fender for our saddle fillers. So let's go ahead and get all of our parts cut out. I am going to mark a line on my fender pattern here real quick, just as a reference to where this is going to be cut out at. It's going to go in like that. And then I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches on either side. So the parts of the hide that I'm going to be utilizing for these particular pieces aren't going to be great leather. They're going to be these flanky spots here, parts that are scratched, some flanky stuff here. Just because they're a filler, they're not going to take any wear or abuse in the actual saddle. They will get taken out of the saddle. So we're going to go ahead and cut them out of these flankier spots, and make sure you do a right and a left of both pieces. So once you get your fillers made, you can use these fillers for any saddle that it will fit. They're a pretty universal thing. So if you're doing another rope saddle, like I'm doing here, this will work for about any rope saddle that you're going to build, as long as the pattern is close to the same. So now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we are going to go ahead and prep them. We're going to take off some of these hard edges so that they don't leave lines in our seat. There's some hard edges, like the back of this one, that we're going to keep for this particular saddle. If you were doing an inskirt, you would take off this back edge. But since this part here is going to be butting up against the tree, we're going to leave this on for this particular saddle. So we're going to go ahead and skive this in here. We're going to skive in this top just so it's a little easier to put in the saddle. And then we are going to skive in this top edge here on both sides. Before we skive them, we're going to dunk them in some water just so it's a little easier to skive. All right, so we're going to start skiving on our first piece here. We're going to flip it over to the rough outside. And like I said, we're going to skive in this edge and this edge on this particular piece. So we're going to start right at this corner and just skive this whole edge in to where there's no bumps. It's just a nice smooth transition from the full thick to the paper thin. So typically when you first start out skiving, it's best to start on a rock so you don't chew up your table. But I am skiving on the table just because I'm being really careful to not chew it up. So that's our first skive done. Just a nice smooth transition. This one we're just going to take off the edge and just have a nice even taper just to make it easier to put in the saddle. So that's our first piece skived. And remember, if you're doing an inskirt, you're going to want to skive this back portion here as well. So an inskirt rigging is just the type of rigging that the skirt and the rigging are one singular piece, where on this particular saddle it's a D-ring rigging and the skirt and the rigging are two separate pieces. So that is our second piece skived. Now this last piece, we're just going to take a nice thin skive about 1 inch up and taper it down to nothing. Now that we have everything skived, we're going to go ahead to our saddle. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to tuck this guy up in here. You can bend this edge down a little bit to make it slide in your saddle a little easier. It should just tuck right in. Okay. And then you're going to put this piece underneath, lining it up with your stirrup leather slot, and then angling it to the position that you'd like your fender to sit. So I like my fenders to sit a little bit forward. I don't want them to hang back necessarily. You can see if it's hung clear back here, it leaves all this spot up here empty, which is going to be filled up by a fender when the person is riding it. So we're going to slide that forward to where everything's nice and full. And then just try and get it to the point where the fender should be sitting in the saddle. So I like right here. So I'm going to take this out. I'm going to mark it. And now we can take this over to a sewing machine and sew it up. And we mark it just in case something shifts on the way over to the sewing machine. That way it's all still lined up. So we're going to go ahead, take this over to the sewing machine, and just put a stitch around it just to hold everything in place. So for sewing this, we are going to use 277 top thread and a 207 bottom thread. And when we sew around it, we're going to stay about an inch-ish to the inside of our line, just in case we have to do any skiving on future saddles, because these are pretty universal and we might run into something where one of these edges would have to be skived. So we're going to go ahead and sew around it. And now that it's sewn, we're going to use this one as a reference for the other piece that we have to make sure that they're in the same spot. So we're going to go over to the other piece now. Go ahead and set our two pieces together. And then I'm going to go ahead and line up these bottoms on this. And this should ensure that our pieces are in the same spot. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this piece to the sewing machine and do the same thing. Now with everything sewn, we're going to tuck this into where it goes. And this should line up just perfectly right there. Now we're going to run a screw right at the front of this to hold it in place while we work on the rest of the saddle. Okay. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And then when placing this front screw here, we want to keep it high enough that when the customer is to lift up their seat, they don't see an extra screw hole in their rigging here. Let's put that screw in. Okay, so that is how we build and install fender fillers. For more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to our Shop Talk channel. Thanks for watching.